Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus arcade video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tuned. Now this game works on both Japanese and American BIOS. I currently have the American BIOS on it, thinking that maybe the challenge mode would be translated to English if I did that, but sadly that would not be the fact, as the challenge mode still has Japanese for all the descriptions. But we're just going to do some arcade mode play. What I have hooked up now for any game that doesn't use the Dreamcast controller, which is all but 4 games, is my Neo Geo CD controller here. I have that hooked through an extension cable, which allows me to connect all the individual pins to the JAMA harness. So I'm just going to exit out of test mode here. It's already been loaded into the DIM board, so it'll be going right into the game. And let's take a look at this. I'll raise the volume if it's necessary, because I don't think it's loud enough. And I'll adjust the camera if I need to a little bit. Okay, and of course this is that same intro that you had seen in the previous new pickups video. Now this game was released back in 2004. Of course I probably made mention before that this is a Japanese arcade exclusive. So sadly no console version and no American version. I'm just going to be playing the arcade mode here, which, if you've never played Virtua Fighter 4 in the arcade and your only experience with this game is the home version, honestly, the PlayStation 2 version is good, but sadly this video is not going to really do it justice. But the Naomi 2 arcade version just looks so smooth and so sharp, even without like running a filter on an emulator. Because what you're seeing here is actually running on the real hardware. I have it connected to my 27-inch Samsung monitor because the camera just tends to pick it up a bit better than it does on the CRT. Now what was funny on that first round is I didn't realize that when I had ringed out him, that my character actually just stood on the very edge of the ring and she didn't fall out, and I was like, wow, I'll never do that again. Good thing I captured it on camera here. But it's just so sad that such a great version of this game just will never make it really to the quote-unquote masses, if you will. So just a lot of people will never be able to experience this game unless either A, you dabble with your emulators, which I can honestly say, at the moment of recording this video, which of course is March 11th of 2014, it sounds so futuristic, 2014, but at the moment of recording this, like emulators like DMUL and stuff run this game okay, but they're a bit jittery, and they just don't run the game as well as you see it here. And one thing I will say, which I know I probably say this about every arcade game that I run, but just like the textures and the character models just look so sharp in this. And like for instance the wrinkles on Shun's forehead, they're so defined. Whereas the biggest problem with the PlayStation 2 version that I see with both the original and Evolution is that it's just honestly full of jaggies. Whereas here, even on the LCD monitor, the characters remain nice and sharp.
Fight 2. Ready? Go.
And of course, with like the Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, that guy in the beginning, I think his name's like Go or Goa or something like that. And then Brad Burns, they got added. But Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tunes didn't add any characters. It just very balanced the all the movesets, and it added a couple things here and there for like the challenge mode. And it just generally made the game feel a lot more balanced than it had previously been. Now, one thing I can always say is Akira always seems to at least hit me a decent amount. I know in Dead or Alive 5 I always have a problem with him, especially if he's in like the later stages, because as you know, in the later stages of most fighting games, the difficulty tends to be higher, and on higher difficulties, I find that Akira is just one of these characters that's really hard. So it doesn't really help the cause here of me trying to beat him. And he almost looks exactly like this in Dead or Alive if you've never seen him. Now, of course, as I had mentioned, this was released exactly in July of 2004 in Japan, but the original arcade version hit arcades in 2001. A year later, you got Evolution, then, of course, 2 years later, you got this game. And one thing, if you only are familiar with the PlayStation 2 version, you'll notice is like all the effects, like the snow, how the snow moves on the ground, is just so much more accurate than it was in the PlayStation 2 version. And just every effect you see is just spot on. There's no way around that. One version of Virtua Fighter that I think is actually pretty funny, that one of these days I'll probably do a video on it, is Virtua Fighter 10th Anniversary, which is basically if you took the whole Virtua Fighter 4 game and then gave it Virtua Fighter 1 graphics, but you like kept the same mechanics and everything. So it was, in America at least, it was a pack-in with Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, which was only a greatest hits game, and it's just on the same disc, where I believe in Japan it was actually released as an individual release, where you'd have to buy a separate disc. And if you look really close at Lau's face there, like the wrinkles in his face just look so defined in this version. It's just all the fine details that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. Oh, and a quick story for you is the first time I actually played Virtua Fighter 4 was in the local arcade that was around here, which sadly at the time of this recording no longer exists. It just one day up and left them all. But I had seen, like, I was like, wow, Virtua Fighter 4, I didn't know they had 4 of these already, and I played it, and just the way that the combos work as opposed to like earlier Virtua Fighter games, which always honestly felt a little bit more clunkier than this, it just had that flow to it that that just I felt like was a much better playing game. Oh, and if you're wondering, this also added new stages as well. I had noticed that right over there. And now this goes without saying, I probably have said this in about half of the arcade videos or main reviews that I've ever done, is that my most hated match of any fighting game is the mirror match. At least I'll at least lose like one match with doing the mirror match. So that's it's just a thing with me. Any fighting game I've ever played, especially against the AI. And this, at the time of playing this is like, I believe, my like third time playing Final Tune, because I can honestly tell you it took me a while to actually figure out how to hook up the controller to the Naomi 2 here. And one thing I will make mention of, that I notice this all the time, but a lot of people will post the gameplay of this where they're playing it on an emulator. But the problem is they have it stretched out to widescreen, which honestly makes the game look horrible. So if you ever see anyone with this in widescreen, either they're playing it on an emulator and the emulator's stretching it out to widescreen, which doesn't really work all that well, or they have a monitor like mine, which is a widescreen, and they just tell the monitor to stretch it. But either way you slice it, this is a full frame game. It's not widescreen. But, for instance, as I was gushing about earlier, is the character models look nice, but not only that, I've seen a lot of games which can deliver a really nice character model, but the biggest problem is that the backgrounds tend to suffer. But if you notice, the backgrounds are fully textured, they just look excellent. The biggest thing that Virtua Fighter 3 fans have complained about is that the game has these boxed-in arenas as opposed to Virtua Fighter 3, which had the more open arenas. But I can honestly tell you, I don't really mind having more of these boxed-in arenas. I think it actually is kind of cool. It actually reminds me a bit of one of my other Sega fighting games that I like a lot, which is Fighting Vipers, which use the same kind of format. And honestly, I don't think they're too claustrophobic or anything, because I can honestly say in some of the Virtua Fighter 3 stages, which sadly my only real experience with that is the Dreamcast version, but some of the stages will have uneven ground, there's one rooftop stage, and if you have the high ground, you tend to do a lot better. Now, one thing I have to say about Vanessa is I honestly think she's the female Jeffrey, because she's a very strong character. She does a decent amount of throws and a lot of hard hits, so she has that very Jeffrey style to her. And if you're not careful, she will destroy you. Of course, she was one of the new Virtua Fighter 4 characters. There was also lei-fei the monk. I think he was the other Virtua Fighter 4 added character in the original Virtua Fighter 4. But of course, one thing that's strange about Virtua Fighter is the sumo wrestler doesn't seem like he's in many games. That's Taka Arashi. He got completely removed from this game, but he was in Virtua Fighter 3. But of course, he was re-added with Virtua Fighter 5R. And of course, if you played Final Showdown, which is the final version of Virtua Fighter 5, he was in that because R came before Final Showdown. One thing I'm actually kind of sad she doesn't say in this is I always thought it was funny when Sarah was like, "Better run home to Mama now." Speaking of Jeffrey, there he is. And I know ever since Virtua Fighter 3, they've increased the general size of Jeffrey to make him a much bigger hulking guy. Whereas in the original Virtua Fighter, he was a little bit bigger than, let's say, Akira or Jackie, but he really didn't have that build to him. So he was not really as intimidating as he is at this point. Right now you see him and you're like, wow, that's really some guy that could really beat you up. And I can remember even in Virtua Fighter 3, the stage that Jeffrey had was this island tropical stage. So they just kept that same motif there. But I will honestly admit that I am not the best Virtua Fighter player. So I do lose a couple times here and there, but it's another one of those games that I really do enjoy, and I really just like the series, and I think that honestly when it came to Virtua Fighter 4, this is when the series really excelled. Don't get me wrong, Virtua Fighter 5 isn't bad, but I just tend to like this game just a lot better, which, if I hadn't mentioned it in any of my other videos, Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tune was actually the reason I got a Naomi 2 instead of a Naomi 1, because I just wanted to play this, like, almost like lost version of the game that, really didn't get enough exposure, in my opinion, because it was Japanese and arcade exclusive. So now I have this fully playable game now on my system, so I'm very happy to have that. And one thing I will mention is, I know a lot of people on YouTube who have Naomi setups say that it like takes forever for the GD-ROM to load to the DIM board, but at least for this game, which is one of the longest ones, it takes about 3 minutes, which is not bad at all, because basically you're dumping all the data from the GD-ROM into the memory of the DIM board, which that's actually pretty quick if you ask me for dumping the all game data, considering how long games take to install these days. And as I was mentioning earlier, Brad Burns was the other Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution added character. He's kind of like your kickboxing type guy, and he does that weird breathing thing when he's fighting you, which a lot of like your kickboxing characters will tend to do that weird thing. I can remember playing early games like Dead or Alive and Soul Blade, and seeing like the fabric doing that like that flying in the wind thing, and thinking, wow, these graphics are amazing. I couldn't see them really getting better than this. But of course, you know, with every new game, you're gonna get some general enhancements. Now this has final stage, but just about every Virtua Fighter game I played, after this you face Dural, and I can honestly say, in all the years I've played Virtua Fighter games, I have never, can't recall a time that I've beat Dural. She always tends to beat me. And now this stage reminds me a lot of the Dead or Alive stage, the Danger Zone. The only thing that it really needed was to, like, for the platform to be... Actually, it does look like the platform is moving a little bit. You probably can even hear it over my voice, but you hear me basically bashing on the controller trying to fight this character. And I can honestly say this is probably the best I've done against Dural in quite some time. I don't recall ever beating her, and the sad part is you only get one turn. So if you lose against Dural, you don't get another chance. It's just kind of like the bonus stage, which they don't let you retry. And if you're wondering, Dural's name was a direct reference to the joypad sequence that was used to make her a playable character, which was down, up, right, A, plus left, D-U-R-A-L. But yeah, that's Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tune, at least the arcade mode. I will probably come back at another time and do a video showing you the challenge mode, which has kind of an Outrun inspired layout with how the grid works. You know, like you kind of keep to the left if you want to have easy, go to the right if you want to be harder. But this game, I can honestly say without the shadow of a doubt, is an excellent game. I highly recommend it to anybody who has a Naomi 2 setup. Definitely get this game. Of course, your DIM board will have to be running firmware 3.17 or higher. If it doesn't, this game will fully load into the DIM board, but it'll just throw an error saying that your firmware is wrong, and it will just not work. But I highly recommend this for anybody. In fact, I can honestly say getting a Naomi 2 is worth it just to play this game. Well, that has been another Game Nexus Arcade video, and I shall see you later. Bye.
Game over.